Well, good evening and welcome to Dome at Home for April the 25th, 2024. I'm your host, Scott Young, planetarium astronomer at the Manitoba Museum, and we're broadcasting from here in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory. And it is great to be back with all of our Dome at Home friends. Nice to see you all. Seeing people say hello in the chat and checking in. I didn't get a chance to type fast enough to catch everybody, but hi all. Thanks for joining us. Kim and Kevin from Yarker. Nice to see you guys. And Hollis from Connecticut. Craig and Ulrika. Nice to see you. Vivian and Neil. And fantastic. People are all signing in right on time. I managed to ensure that we weren't up against a Jets game, which some people have been monitoring, and so luckily we managed to avoid that, and we managed to avoid having to broadcast live from the museum's fundraising dinner, which was last night. So Dome at Home right in the middle there. It's been a busy week for all of us at the museum and the planetarium. Okay, we've got a lot of things going on today, and the feature, I think, is to show off some of your images. We had, of course, unless you were off planet for the last month, you heard about the eclipse, and we got a flood of images from people all around North America, really. And it was great to be able to see your pictures, and we're going to go through a bunch of them tonight. And hey, Melissa, and I'm hoping Ryan and Rowan are there as well. Nice to see you guys from out west. Hey, Tiffany. It is really nice to see all the images that people send in, because it really, first of all, they're great images, and when you share them on the show, it inspires other people to go out and try and take pictures and try and do astronomy. It's one thing to sort of sit and think about it, but sometimes, especially over the winter and spring months, it's easy to sort of say, I'll just stay inside. But when you get out under the stars, you never waste time out under the stars, or in this case, out under our star, the sun. And yeah, so we'll have to see. Wait, is there a Jets game tonight? I thought it was Friday. Oh, maybe there is a Jets game tonight. Oops, sorry. Well, thanks for watching anyway. Oh, hey Linda, nice to see you. And Stan and Sylvia, nice to see you guys. Nice to get your pictures too. We'll be seeing those a little bit later in the show. All right, let me see. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to go through. So let's dive right in. We're going to start off, let me see here. Make sure that this is actually reset all the way back to the beginning here. I was adding pictures right up to the end of the show, or the end of the little intro. I actually sit here while that little intro is running, and it gives me time to do some little adjustments and stuff like that. We're going to start off with ostensibly the theme for this show is talking about things in May. And one of the big things in May is it's International Astronomy Day. May the 18th, Saturday. Now, International Astronomy Day has been around since the 70s, and really it was a time that people just went out and, brought their telescopes out to a park or a sidewalk or whatever, and university departments and planetariums and observatories and all that kind of stuff opened things up to the public. And it was, bringing astronomy to the people, because often people don't get a chance to go to a place where there's telescopes or things like that, and they think they have to go to a really dark location. And so on Astronomy Day, we set up where the people are, even if it's not great skies. So this Saturday, Saturday, May the 18th, is International Astronomy Day this spring. There's actually one in the fall as well. We will be out at the Leaf in Assiniboine Park, the same place the eclipse event was. We love it at the Leaf. The Assiniboine Park Conservancy folks have just been wonderful hosts, and if you haven't gone to their restaurant there, you really should check it out. It's really good. And I haven't actually been inside the Leaf yet, but my oldest kid was in before the eclipse while I was doing setting up, and was just blown away by the different biomes that they saw. So great place. And so we're going to be there for International Astronomy Day. We'll be looking at the sun, no eclipse, but the sun's actually really active right now. So there's lots of stuff to look at, both with the eclipse glasses style telescope that looks at the white light, but also those special telescopes that show the prominences of the flames on the edge of the sun. Those will be out as well. So that'll be fun. Astronomy Day is always chosen so that there is a first quarter moon in the sky. That means it's usually visible in the daytime in the afternoon, so you don't have to even stay up very late. And then we'll stay basically until the place closes around 11 o'clock. So once it does get dark, we'll do a little constellation tour. We'll have some telescopes set up and things like that. I say it's going to be mostly the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, the Astronomy Club that was out at the eclipse event as well. And so that'll be a fun event. It's free, it's fun. You should come down and join us if you're at all in the area. And, Tiffany, your birthday is on the 18th, International Astronomy Day. Nice, that's pretty cool. Okay, and we got some clarification. Yeah, okay, the Jets game is Friday night. It's funny, we were worried that there'd be a Jets game during the museum fundraiser on Wednesday initially, because they were going back and forth once we were in the playoffs. It's really hard to get people to come to a fundraising dinner unless you have a big TV on a Jets game during the playoffs. So, hey, Tracy, nice to see you. Excellent. And the leaf is beautiful. Wear layers. Yes, because it gets really hot in there, and it can be cool as well. Hey, James, nice to see you. Many of you will have met James if you came out to some of our events, not at the eclipse, but at previous events, because James is a member of the Astronomy Club, and he's been out with his telescopes and his binoculars and things like that as well. So you might have met him without even knowing. Dome homers are everywhere. Okay, so International Astronomy Day. It is going to be a great time. So come on out and we'll try and do some astronomy together. I'll be there for pretty much the whole day. So track me down and we can hang out and do some observing together. That'll be kind of fun. I wanted to mention our Telescopes for Kids program that the Astronomy Club ran sort of got delayed and put on hold and things like that for a little bit, just because we had, as a volunteer organization, it just had a few things that got in the way. But those telescopes have been awarded. The Astronomy Club gave away 5 telescopes to young, deserving folks that wrote some essays or sent in pictures or made videos about what they would do with the telescope. And so the Astronomy Club runs that usually every year. It's the kind of thing where if you are in a family with a kid who would like a telescope and the family doesn't already have a telescope somewhere, so it's not designed for your third telescope or, an extra telescope, but that's a thing that you can keep track of. That's the link there to the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada's Winnipeg chapter. Oh, and Hollis, sorry, the Winnipeg Jets are our NHL hockey team. So no, not football. The Blue Bombers haven't started yet. I think that starts up in late May, early June. So that's our football team in the CFL. All right. I keep forgetting not forgetting. I have to remind myself that we have folks from all across Canada and the United States, and we still have a few international viewers as well. So if you're not from Canada, do say hi in the chat and just say where you're from. We love to put a little pin in the map so that we can sort of see where our reach is, and that's always helpful. Let's see, coming up in May, the first Friday of every month. First Fridays is a big thing here in Winnipeg downtown. Basically, the entire arts and theater district, the Exchange District, opens up, and there's a whole bunch of open houses in art studios and places like that. And also the museum, the planetarium, and the science gallery open up. And so on the first Friday in May, there will be free admission from 4 o'clock to 9 o'clock at the museum, the planetarium, and the science gallery. This first Friday, the theme is, May is actually Asian Heritage Month. Excuse me. And we will be doing Asian-themed constellation stories. There's a whole bunch of different versions of the constellations. It's not all the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. Every culture has their own, and there's lots of cool stories there. So we'll be sharing some of those and looking at the sky with a different sort of cultural lens. So that'll be a lot of fun if you can join us for that. And finally, Bill Nye is coming back. He had to cancel his presentation here because there was a snowstorm between us and Edmonton where he was. So that was a big a big mess that day. That was one of the extra winters that I was telling you about, folks out in northwestern Ontario. The seasons have been all over the place. Today, 25 degrees Celsius. So that's a nice late spring, early summer day for us. Okay. Oh, hey, Wing. Hey, Randy. Nice to see you. Hello, Yurkowski family. Nice to see you. Oh, out by Lac du Bois. Nice. Great skies out there, I got to say. Friends of mine used to run Trappers, which was in the cottage area around there, and we would go out and just beautiful dark skies out in eastern Manitoba. Good stuff. So you have a great view out there. Okay, last promo bit. The Pink Floyd show is coming back. It's now the only location in Canada where you can see it here in Winnipeg. Tickets will go on sale on Monday. You might want to check that out if you're into the Pink Floyd Planetarium Extravaganza celebrating the 50th anniversary of Dark Side of the Moon. Okay, that seems like a lot of promo and upcoming events, but there's just lots of opportunities for people to come and do stuff at the planetarium and with the astronomy club. So I wanted to get that on your calendar because, summer fills up. Let's move on to some of the great events that have happened. Oh, Wing says Science Rendezvous 2024. I totally forgot about that. If you remember the dates, Wing, if you can throw that into the chat there, that would be great. Science Rendezvous is again an open house kind of event. The Astronomy Club, RASC, will be out. The University of Manitoba is doing things, and there's all sorts of great sort of science outreach activities as part of that. May 11th. Oh yeah, thanks, Kevin. That's a national kind of program, so it stretches all the way out to where you guys are, but definitely lots of opportunity, and there will be, like I say, telescopes as part of that event as well, coming up. Okay. You know what? Before we go to our images of the eclipse, I had a question that came in actually just after the last show, and Andy and Ruby were asking about the comets. We talked a little bit about comets in the sky. There was a comet earlier in the year, not super bright, but was visible in binoculars if you knew exactly where to look. It was a faint little fuzzy thing, but we saw some pretty good pictures online of the comet. People taking with long exposures and decent sized telescopes. There's another comet which is called Comet Shuchinchan Atlas. Atlas is an acronym for an automatic telescope that discovered it, and Shuchinchan is the name of the amateur astronomer who also discovered it with his backyard telescope. I think it's still pretty cool that amateur astronomers searching the sky can find comets, even in these days of automated robotic telescopes that, supposedly are covering the whole sky. There's still discoveries being made by people in their backyard. Anyway, that comet is set to be a good view for us in September when it's sort of closest to the sun. And Andy was asking why we weren't already talking about it and able to see it, because it was in the sky in January. It was discovered quite early. Well, the reason is that it's in a very unusual orbit. And so let's see here. We just went over to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory's Orbit Viewer, which is a handy thing to just use whenever we need. And I'm just going to add in the comet's acronym, 2023A3. And let's see. There we go. Okay, so this is the solar system. You can see the planets there. It's you might not be able to read it. The outer one is Neptune, and then the green one is Uranus. Do I have a mouse visible here? No. And then the yellow one is Saturn. And as we zoom in, we come into the inner solar system. There's Jupiter, that orange one, and there's Mars, and the blue one is Earth. So that's the Earth's orbit. This white oval is the orbit of the comet. And so if we sort of go right from the edge of the solar system, you see it's not in with the other planets. It's plunging down towards us from way out in space. It's probably never been around the sun before, and it's coming shooting down into the solar system. And it actually dips down below the solar system when it comes closest to the sun. And that's why we kind of can't see it, because the Earth is round, and we live on the north part of it, and the comet will be visible more from the south part of it. However, it does, as it swings around the sun, it's expected to get very bright, like easily naked eye visibility bright in September and for the southern hemisphere. And then in early October, it swings back up above our horizon as it's sort of rocketing back up towards the north. And we'll have probably a good week or two where it'll be visible in our skies very close to the sun, first for a few days in the evening, and then over in the morning sky. So that'll be coming in October, and it should be nice and bright, and we hope a really great sight. It could be, maybe not the sight of the year, because I think the eclipse will still take that, but it could be one of the best sights of the year. Or it could fizzle and do nothing. Comets are very unpredictable, particularly ones that have never been through the solar system before, and so we really don't know what it's going to do. Sometimes these comets come through and they're amazing. Sometimes they come through and you can hardly even see them. So once we get a little bit closer, we'll know a little bit. But anyway, Andy, that's why we're not already talking about this comet as a thing already. It's also running a little bit behind its predictions. It's only about 10th magnitude right now, which means it's too faint to see even in good-sized binoculars. You really need a telescope to spot it, and it's just a little spot at this point. This is where it is here. If we zoom right in, it's way up here. You can see where the name is. I hope you can see where the name is. And so we're still up above the solar system. Once it plunges down below and then dips back up, we'll get a better view. So that comet will be something to watch for. And that's why we're not already getting a view of it. All right, speaking of views, we have lots of things to look at in the sky. Right now, it doesn't get dark until quite late. That ridiculous daylight savings thing that we do, pushing the clock ahead, means that sunset happens later in our day, which means astronomy happens later in our day. Very frustrating. I would love for it to stop. But anyway, once it does get dark, if you look over towards the west, you still have your last view of some of those winter constellations. I managed to still glimpse Orion's belt just as after sunset, as it was starting to go down below the neighbor's house. And, we'll turn off these asteroids. We don't need all those asteroids up there. And Taurus, the bull, behind this tree would be where the Seven Sisters are. They're really setting right after the sun, and so really not something you can watch for. Off in the south, the main constellation would be, I guess, Leo the lion, one of the bright stars here, Regulus, and then this backwards question mark or sickle shape is sort of pretty distinctive to see. It's kind of like a Big Dipper in that it really stands out as a defined shape. Most constellations don't, but that part certainly does. And then there's this triangle over here that's supposed to be the lion's rear end. A good constellation to know, the ecliptic, the plane of the solar system, passes right past Regulus here and dips down. So this is where you would find all of the objects in the solar system. That comet actually was just off in below Virgo, or actually I think it's right in here somewhere right now. Let me just see. I have to turn our asteroids back on. There it is. That comet is right in the constellation of Virgo. So relatively accessible in our sky, but it is quite faint. And so if I zoom right in here, we'll see what kind of view we're going to get. There's a little sort of faint fuzzy, and this is an estimation. It's not even an actual prediction, so it will be the kind of thing that'll be quite hard to see. But as the night goes on, you get those things rising higher. The sky gets darker. Finally around midnight, things are almost dark, and then the moon comes up because we've just gone through full moon. But that means the next 2 weeks, the moon will be rising later and later. We'll have more and more dark sky. We're coming into the dark of the moon when you can actually go out and do some out-of-city observing and get the best views. If you wait long enough, the summer constellations start to come up. The moon right now is out over in the constellation of Scorpius, which is sort of right on the border between spring and summer. I find that May and June is probably the best time to see it. It barely pokes up above the southern horizon, so it's one of the ones that's hardest to see for us, but definitely one that is worth catching. And then I would say that the most important springtime constellation is probably Boötes the herdsman here, at least right now. This is I don't know how this is supposed to look like a herdsman. It looks like an ice cream cone to me with big blob of ice cream on top. That's fine. But right next to it is this tiny little group of stars. It's like a little semicircle, or if we turn off the lines, it kind of looks like, let's see, kind of looks like a smiley face with a couple of eyes here. That's Corona Borealis. And the reason I'm pointing it out is that that's where, right about here, any day now, sometime between now and September, a star that is there already but is 10th magnitude, fainter than you can see without a telescope, is going to explode and become as bright as this other star over here and these brighter stars in Boötes. That's going to happen any day now. We know it's going to happen because it happens every 80 years. And 80 years ago and 160 years ago, it happened. And people have gone back and actually found records even previous to that there was this star happening on an 80-year cycle. It's called T Corona Borealis, so that'll be big news when it happens. And likely, it's going to be an amateur astronomer that first notices it, because sure, there are professionals watching, but they can't spend all their time watching for something that might happen. The first person that's going to see it is probably going to be someone like you or me, who just happens to know the constellations and goes out and looks, and it just happens to have gone off like in the last hour or something like that. And then you can report it to the International Astronomical Union and probably get lots of interviews. Anyway, that's something to watch for. And we'll do a special as soon as that happens, because once it occurs, it'll be something that we'll only be able to see for maybe a few days before it disappears. Okay, we won't go through all the constellations because we did spring constellations last time, but I think it's probably time to get to some of our images here. And we did get a lot of eclipse images. There were quite a few people that came out to see the eclipse at Assiniboine Park at the Leaf. That's the Leaf in the background. You can see some of the plants in there. And those are all the people. And for those of you that came out and tried to say hi, I'm sorry if I didn't get a chance to chat very much, because it was a madhouse. We were totally overwhelmed with the number of people that came out. And at the last minute, the live broadcast had to be relocated because of an internet change at the Leaf. And we had to pick up all of our gear and move it about 300 meters to get proper Wi-Fi so that we could do our broadcast. And the Premier had tweeted out that our broadcast was the way schools should watch the eclipse, so we kind of had to make it happen. And that put me way on the other side of the building from most of the crowd. So I didn't get to really see all of the cool stuff that was going on. I was just off by myself on the other side. Anyway, it was a great event. Thank you for coming out if you were there. And this was taken by one of my colleagues at the museum. Ulrika sent in some great stuff. The shot on the right is the eclipse, looks like near the peak there. And this is with just the eclipse glasses held over the lens of the cell phone camera. So very simple kind of setup, but captured a great image of the eclipse at maximum. And there the mascot demonstrating proper eclipse glasses use. Very, very, very important in terms of safety. I see there's a T Corona Borealis question. I'll come back to that one. I missed it, but I'll come back to that after we're done our eclipse stuff. Don't let me forget, Alan. Here's a shot from Stan Clausen, another longtime viewer. Got a little telescope just before the eclipse and set up a projection system and took some images through the eyepiece with the phone. So there's another great shot. And this is with a small tabletop telescope, but it worked perfectly for observing the eclipse. Nice job, Stan. Thank you for sending that in. This was the crowd looking the other way. Lots of people looking at the sun, lots of folks out. Ulrika's sister Sophia was out in Montreal where the eclipse was total and sent this picture in for us to drool over. Very nice. There you see the total solar eclipse with the corona of the sun exposed all the way around. This shot really shows how far the corona sticks out. The moon is that black part, that black circle there, obviously, but some of these rays stick out, 2 moon diameters beyond. So when we look at the sun, we see the sun, but those rays are actually always there, sticking out that far. We just can't see it because the blue sky prevents us from seeing it. And just down here, right at the bottom, is Venus. The planet became visible very, very briefly during totality. So great view in Montreal. I'm glad they had some clear skies out there. There were a few places where we were really worried about clouds, but it worked out really well. Krishna down in Texas, down in Houston. Nice to see you. Saw you check into the chat. I'm glad you dropped in because Krishna sent me a whole series of images taken from Mesquite. I guess you had to dodge clouds a little bit. Texas had patchy clouds all over the place. And you sent me a whole bunch of things here. I figured rather than show the individual things, I'd just put them together in a little video. So what we've got here's the whole sequence of Krishna's images showing the entire eclipse, the partial phases, through to totality with that beautiful corona. What a great shot this is. And then I picked one of the other ones here where you can see just the inner corona, and then of course the end of the eclipse as things go off. Beautiful sequence. I'll send you this, Krishna, so you've got the little video if you'd like it. But thanks for sending the whole set. I really appreciate that. And then I wanted to bring out. Oh wait, how do I? There we go. This is the totality shot. Just the image that we can just take a look at. Really, really nice. And then the one there shows, first of all, you can see these little red flames sticking around the edge of the sun. Those are the prominences that in a longer exposure get covered up by the corona. But you can also see some of the thin clouds that were dodging in and out. So I'm glad you had some good clear sky during totality, although it looks like it was really close there with that cloud. I'm really glad you got stuff. Great job, Krishna. Thanks very much for sending that in. Here's a bunch of people. We watched totality from a couple of places in Texas, actually. NASA did a great broadcast, and I watched totality 5 times in a row from various places, but I only saw it on TV, and I gotta say, TV is not the same as seeing it live. But we had all these folks out here waiting for the sky to clear. The first hour and a bit of the eclipse here in Winnipeg was pretty much overcast. We couldn't see anything, but these folks managed to see totality, and then just after, I think, our third totality, the sun came out and we could see it through our eclipse glasses, so that worked out really well. Now, this is a great picture. Stan sent me this one. David Gerbrandt is his cousin out in London, Ontario. He held up a colander, one of those things you drain your pasta with, and each of the holes in the colander acted like a pinhole camera projecting an image of the eclipse onto the floor. So you get this multiple eclipse view. And Winston here is obviously entranced with the power of such a simple device to view the eclipse. That's a great shot. Thanks for sharing that, because I wanted to shoot something like this during the eclipse, because we always talk about pinhole cameras and how they work and what's the best way to make them and stuff. And I just never had the chance to do it because we were just swamped. So here we've got a great example of using just a simple household tool to watch the eclipse. Totally safe, because you're not looking at the sun, you're just looking at the shadow and the image on the ground. Very, very nice. If I didn't put your eclipse picture on, it's not because it wasn't good enough, it's because I literally didn't put it in the list here. So if you sent me pictures and I didn't show them, please remind me and I'll show them next time, because generally we try and show every picture that we get sent in, unless there's something, hideously inappropriate or something like that. No, but so please, if somehow your picture didn't make it, just let me know, space@manitobamuseum.ca, and I will rectify that the next show around. Sylvia Clausen sent this great picture in of the eclipse culprit, the moon, just a couple of, I guess about 2 weeks right after. That's the full moon there rising, the pink moon they call it. looks a little orange, but this really captures the moonrise really nicely with the reflection off the water in the background. Nice shot. Thanks, Sylvia. Geo Walker was someone that I think was out at the eclipse event, and we were chatting. I think it was her, and then sent me an email with just some great pictures of some of their other images. This is the aurora from out in Oak Hammock Marsh. You can see some of their facilities there. It's a great spot to watch the aurora. And they also sent a nice Milky Way shot. Those of you that travel south from Winnipeg will recognize that church as being the one right in the middle of Pembina Highway, in between the two highway lanes on the way south towards the U.S. border. It's a great spot to shoot stuff because there's room to pull off, and it's pretty quiet when the traffic's not busy. So thanks, Gia, for those. Those are great shots too. Okay, wow, so many pictures and so many amazing stories and descriptions that came in with those pictures. So thank you very much for sharing those. And let's see here. What else do we have on our list before we go to that? Let's see. There we go. Okay. I think it's time.
Cool space stuff.
There we go. Okay, there was a lot of cool space stuff in the last month. I mean, the eclipse was pretty hard to beat. But it was, there was a lot of space exploration things going on. There's a launch down in Florida or off in California about every 3 or 4 days now. There are so many rockets going up. Many of them are the Starlink satellites that SpaceX is putting up, but there's a lot of other stuff going up as well. There's a lot of rocket activity. One that we've been waiting for is finally on the schedule for May the 6th. This is the Boeing Starliner, the CST-100 spacecraft. They flew this in their first test flight almost 3 years ago, and it had a couple of issues that needed to be resolved. So they before putting people on it, they brought it back in and did some more work on it. And then they brought it out to the launch pad, and they discovered another issue, so they hauled it back. And then there was a scheduling issue with the space station. And then when they were ready to go, actually they were bumped because the Psyche mission to the asteroid that I went down to see was launching, and then they had to stay off the pad for that. And then they discovered another problem, and it's just been this repeated set of problems and solving them. And so now finally the spacecraft is ready to go. It's headed out to the pad, and on May the 6th, the first couple of astronauts will board it and fly up to orbit and make sure it all works. And once that occurs, we'll have another Canadian going into space, because the member of the crew of the first operational flight is Josh Kutrick, Canadian astronaut. He'll be going up for a 6-month tour of duty on the International Space Station on its first docking to the space station in sort of an operational mode. So that's going to be really cool. We'll be watching this flight on May the 6th or soon thereafter with great interest, because it has that effect of, clearing the way for Josh to get his first ride into space. It used to be, in the old days, your first ride into space might be a 15-minute suborbital hop, or it might be a 3 or 4 day trip on an early capsule, or maybe a week or maybe 2 weeks on the space shuttle. Now, first flights are 6 months tour of duty on the space station. So that's pretty cool. We'll be watching Josh's mission, which probably won't happen till 2025 is what they're looking at, the early 2025. And that's if this test flight in May goes correctly. There he is in front of the capsule that he will hopefully be riding into space down next year. So this is a story. NASA is considering changing the moon missions yet again. As you probably know, Artemis 2 is scheduled to take Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen and a crew of 4 around the moon. It was supposed to go this year. It's been bumped to late next year or early next year, so that to meet up with the equipment and so on. There's some things they learned on the first uncrewed test flight. Artemis 3 was supposed to land on the moon. And the moon lander was going to be SpaceX's Starship. Now, I said at the time, given that Starship has yet to land successfully on the Earth, I would be very surprised if they make that schedule. And it sounds like that is the case. NASA has not officially delayed the flight yet, but they are apparently considering pulling the moon landing from Artemis 3 completely. And instead, just having Starship and the Orion spacecraft, which is the NASA Artemis one that would carry people to and from orbit, just dock in Earth orbit, because Starship is not as far along as it should be. In fact, the idea that it's going to land on the moon anytime soon is almost completely given up on, as far as I'm concerned. I would be very surprised if Starship lands on the moon in the 2020s, let alone in the next 14 months, like the schedule says. So the Artemis 3 mission was supposed to be the return to the moon, the first moon landing of humans since 1972. It's not going to be. I mean, NASA has not confirmed that, but I'm calling it here. It's just not going to happen because Starship is just not ready. And they are also still working on the spacesuits that the astronauts will use to walk around. Those are also delayed. That's a fairly important bit. There's no point in going to the moon if you can't get out of your spaceship. So with all these delays, we'll have to see what happens. Artemis 3 may just be a test mission of Starship, which would be cool enough. I mean, when that thing gets going, it's going to be amazing. The Gateway space station that Canada is contributing Canadarm3 to is going to be still going along on its schedule. So that's still going to happen. But it looks like Artemis 4 might be the first moon landing. Another company, Blue Origin, is building a moon landing for Artemis 4. And because it's just a moon lander, it's not supposed to be a ship that can also carry 1 million people to Mars and all of these satellites. And it's not a one size fits all. It's basically all I have to do is land on the moon. You have one job. This design is a lot simpler and is more likely to be ready in time. Now that still means we're talking moon landings in 2027, 2028, maybe in the 2020s. I don't know. At this point, it's really hard to say. Things tend to cost more and take more time than people estimate. NASA has gotten better at estimating those things, but some of these private companies are still new at this, and they're still being very, very optimistic about how much they can accomplish, and then having to change their schedules. So this is kind of a non-cool space stuff segment, but it is definitely the kind of thing that we'll have to watch carefully. Kevin, yes, Blue Origin hasn't even made it to orbit yet. That's true, but that's a matter of scale. The Blue Origin has their New Glenn's rocket, which is pretty much ready for its first test flight. I think they're still finishing it up. But when I was down in Florida, Blue Origin has a whole big facility there that was just being completed for launch preparations and things like that at the Cape. And really, this design is, well, I won't say it's simple, but I mean, this design is basically what we did 50 years ago. It can't be all that hard comparatively to do it again with modern technology and modern manufacturing and all that kind of stuff. The reason that Starship is so far behind is because it being a moon lander is kind of an add-on. That's not really its main thing. Its main thing, like, it's way bigger than it needs to be. Like, look at the scale here. Here you got some stairs, and there's an astronaut. If we go back to Starship, there's the size of an astronaut, and here's where they are in. So they've got to come down like 10 stories to get onto the moon. It's trying to do lots of things. It'll be a great, capable vehicle when all the bugs are worked out, but to make it land on the moon is complicated. So anyway, we'll have to see. These things change all the time. I won't be surprised to see another change a year from now when some other thing comes up, or some other opportunity comes up, or some other company comes up with a different idea, or a new election in the United States changes priorities or whatever. We'll have to see what happens. I am glad, though, that this won't affect our first Canadian moon mission. Jeremy Hansen on Artemis 2 will go around the moon, and that doesn't require any SpaceX gear. It's just the Artemis rocket that they flew automatically on Artemis 1. So really, it's just a matter of making sure that it's safe for humans and going. So we'll get our Canadian moon mission, at least the first one. We'll have to see what the second Canadian moon mission, astronaut still unnamed, is going to be and when that happens. Okay, let me see here. Yeah, that's the last of the cool or not so cool space stuff that we have for this week. Oh, hey, Phil and Fallon, nice to see you checking in. Good to see you. I wanted to get back to a question that went by that I just missed at the end of our segment on the constellations. How can a star keep exploding? What a great question. Alan was asking. It turns out that the star doesn't completely explode. T Corona Borealis is what's called a recurrent nova. It's two stars going around each other, and they orbit. One of them is a big star, like a red giant or a larger star. The other one is a little white dwarf. And the white dwarf is very, very dense. And so even though it's small, it has quite a bit of gravity. And what it's doing is it's stealing material from the other star. There's a flow of material from the big sun that is, large and has a big outer atmosphere that's flowing in and orbiting around the white dwarf. And it takes about 80 years for so much material to accumulate around that white dwarf that finally there's so much material there that nuclear fusion essentially occurs, and the shell of material that is collected all explodes. Now, the white dwarf is still there. It doesn't explode itself. It's just the material that's in orbit around it. And then the white dwarf basically starts stealing more material from its companion star and accumulating it, going around the white dwarf until 80 years from now, there'll be enough again that it will explode again. So it doesn't totally blow itself apart like a supernova, which is the bigger explosion. It basically is just that shell of material. So that's how that works, and that's how it can happen repeatedly. Of course, it won't go on forever, because eventually the companion star is just going to get all of the life sucked out of it, and there won't be anything left. And eventually you'll probably wind up with two white dwarfs just going around each other without any transfer back and forth. So that's how that happens. And then I saw another question go by here that I wanted to get to. Let's see. Michelle saying thanks for the glasses. Good stuff. I'm glad you got pictures of the stuff of the eclipse. And Lou says, why has NASA forsaken earlier moon landing technology for new technology? Could NASA not create a hybrid of both older and newer tech to fly safely to the moon? That's a really good question. It turns out that the original Apollo spacecraft, you just can't build them like that anymore. They built them at the time, and they were big and expensive and actually quite dangerous. They weren't exactly perfectly safe, as we saw with Apollo 13, where there was an explosion and those guys almost didn't make it back. It was pretty lucky that they got 6 successful Apollo missions out of that gear. Now, interestingly, you'll see that the Orion spacecraft looks a lot like the Apollo spacecraft. The Orion itself. Do we have an image of that? Oh yeah, there we go. We'll bring this up. Orion is this spacecraft on the right here, shown about to dock with the Gateway space station. It looks like a souped up, sized up Apollo command module. And that's because, in 50 years, manufacturing has changed, technology has changed, computers have changed, but physics hasn't changed. When you got to come back from space and re-enter through the Earth's atmosphere and make it down to the surface without burning up, you basically need a conical spacecraft with a heat shield at the bottom, because that's the most stable aerodynamic thing. Even if you come in and you're out of control, you're probably going to wind up flipping around so that the heat shield is facing down. You really need that heat shield in the right place to survive the heat of reentry from space at all. And so we are kind of really just making a better version of Apollo in some ways. Now, it turns out that Apollo was also a dead-end technology. All you could do was launch this huge rocket, take 2 people to the surface of the moon. Apollo 17 and Apollo 16 actually stretched the mission to, I think they got something like 10 days on the surface. That was the maximum that you could do. And then you had to come home. And there was no way to, reuse any of that stuff or to revisit the place and build onto it or things like that. It was all you could do is go spend a week, pick up some rocks and come home. The idea now is to actually go to the moon in a sustainable way so that, like the space station, there will be eventually a crew there for a long period of time. And that's why we're not just doing Apollo 2, basically, or Apollo version 2, because you want to be able to stay there. And that's why the Gateway space station is such an important part. This is going to be in orbit around the moon. It will come into being right about the time that the International Space Station needs to be deorbited, because parts of it are 25 years old already and made by the lowest bidder. And you can only duct tape holes in your spacecraft for so long. So the space station has to be retired, and this will come online hopefully around that same time, but it'll be in orbit around the moon, but not in a circular orbit. It'll be in an orbit that goes almost halfway back to Earth before going around the moon. So it'll actually be very efficient to launch new missions to dock with Gateway when it's close to the Earth, and then just ride it for free back to the moon. And then when you're at the moon, you can get into a lander and go down to the surface, or you can get in a lander and go down to the surface and stay on a moon base where there are people there. So it's a sustainability idea. The idea is we're going back to the moon, or forward to the moon. They don't like to say back anymore, but to stay, to essentially have a scientific outpost that is permanently crewed, like we have in places like Antarctica and places like that. So the idea is that you need to do things differently. Unfortunately, the thing about working with private companies is that they do what they want to do, not necessarily just what NASA wants them to do. And so, things like Starship are supposed to be multi-use vehicles, and they have all these grandiose plans of going to Mars and doing all sorts of other things. So that is becoming a bit of a problem in terms of schedules for the first landing. I'm sure down the road, we'll all be very happy that Starship is around, because it will revolutionize the way space travel happens once it works. Right now we're in the teething phases, and so it seems to cause more problems than it is solving so far. But again, the first planes were like that too. I'm sure the Wright brothers were like, oh, this thing isn't going to be able to fly me across the Atlantic. I can barely get it to go down the beach here in Kitty Hawk. Yeah, give it a few years. And so that's where we are. Let's see. Happy birthday, Tiffany. Lots of folks saying there. Phil asks, what is my favorite space movie? You know what? For a while, I stopped watching space movies because the liberties that they would take with what was going on would drive me nuts. No one can hear you scream in space. Well, yeah, that's fine. But some of the movies in the 90s and early 2000s were just so wrong that I just couldn't get past that and just enjoy the plot, like the basic science stuff, like, there's no gravity in space. Yeah, there is. You can't ignore it. Some of I don't know if anybody here is old enough to remember, like, Armageddon with Bruce Willis, where he goes up to blow up the comet and things like that. Oh man, so many wrong things in that movie that just drove me nuts. But some of the newer stuff, like The Martian, for example, had quite a bit of reasonable science. I mean, obviously they had to take some liberties just to make it filmable and to make the story compelling and stuff like that. But most of that's not too bad. Some of the movies like Contact or Interstellar, where there's a little bit more sort of futuristic or hypothetical kind of stuff, a lot of it is plausible. I mean, we don't know it for sure, but a lot of that stuff is plausible. So that's kind of a cool part of science fiction, is that it's not just fiction. Often it can sort of point in the direction, and we'll look back and say, oh yeah, that movie predicted blah, blah, blah. Just like we say about The Simpsons today in politics. Oh, The Simpsons predicted blah, blah, blah. Well, did they really? But anyway, Space 1999. Oh, I remember that show. I was a kid, and I actually built a model of the spacecraft. To me, that's the realistic looking spacecraft. They're not going to be these, fancy Buck Rogers kinds of things that they had before that. It's going to be utilitarian and just big. Let's see. Ben's asking, is Roscosmos still involved? So Russia has said that they're going to pull out of the International Space Station program by after a certain date. There's some tense issues right now in terms of Russia and, well, everyone. That doesn't really translate into NASA. Apparently the space station astronauts are quite, they ignore that politics that's happening down on Earth. But Roscosmos is looking at building a new International Space Station with China, and perhaps there's even been some rumors that maybe India will get involved in that. That's actually good. The more space stations, the better. We have the Chinese space station that's sort of just China, and we've got the International Space Station. But if everybody gets together to build one space station, that's great, but that means you're just going to have one space station. So the more the merrier. Okay. Val's talking about the book about bringing Columbia home. There's a special on Netflix about Columbia, the last flight, that goes into detail about the Columbia crash and the details of how they sort of figured out what happened. Space travel is still kind of dangerous. We're not even at the point of, airplanes where, there's still every once in a while you get stuck on the tarmac because they have to fix something on your airplane. But I mean, by and large, air travel is pretty safe at this point. 100 years after the first airplane, 100 years after the first passenger spacecraft, I think we'll be laughing. But we're still in that early days, and you can either be very, very careful and try and reduce all the risks, or you can take some risks and hope that things work out well. And we've seen a little bit of both sides in the last little while. Have I seen ISS yet? Is that the one where there's like a civil war on the space station or something like that? Yeah, I'm not going to go see that. I am just not gonna do that because I know it's just gonna make me mad. And Jacqueline asks, how do you decommission a space station? You pretty much bring it down into the Pacific Ocean. There's a big area there where you're as far from land as possible, and so any pieces that burn up are not going to hit anybody. There's not even any inhabited islands in a certain area, and that's where people tend to bring down their spacecraft when they can do that. So the plan will be once they're done, all the good stuff will be brought back to Earth, and hopefully some museum pieces will come back and stuff like that, and then the whole big structure will get dumped in the ocean, and it will mostly burn up, but not completely, and then it will sink. So that's what'll happen with the space station. It's too bad. I really wish you could get this stuff back somehow and put it in a museum. When I was in Kennedy Space Center, I saw Atlantis, the space shuttle there, and it's right there, and it's just beautiful and inspiring and wonderful. We just can't do that with the space station. It's just way too big to get it back, unfortunately. All right. As I say in the chat there, we'd love to hear what you think of the program. If you have suggestions, if you have comments, you have complaints, anything like that, fill out our survey there. And you can also just send us information, comments. You can send us your pictures. You can send us requests of what you'd like us to cover on future shows. You can reach us through the Manitoba Museum on Facebook and YouTube. We're also Manitoba Museum on Twitter and TikTok and Instagram. X, Twitter. And the way to reach me most easily is space@manitobamuseum.ca. That comes right to my desk. And I would love to hear from you. And I would love to see what you're doing in astronomy. If you go out and do stuff, even if you don't take pictures, we've had people send us drawings. We've had people send us just a description of what they went out and did. I'd love to be able to share that with people because, or even if you don't want me to share it, I'd love to see it because knowing that people are taking this show and then going out and doing stuff with it in their lives is wonderful. So I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. Thank you all for joining us, and we will be back for the May the 6th space launch of the Boeing spacecraft. And we will be back with another special broadcast on Astronomy Day, May the 18th. And then the regular Dome at Home will be the last Thursday of May, just before we come up to, summer solstice. So that'll be a fun show. Join us for all of those. If you want to get notifications, go to the manitobamuseum.ca webpage. You can sign up for our mailing list, and they send you reminders of all the stuff going on. Thanks again. Have a great evening, and I hope you get out under the stars, and I hope you get a chance to see some of these things that we talk about. See you all soon, and see you just in, I guess, a couple of weeks for that space launch. Good night, everybody.